Good everyone, and welcome back to Global Education Zone. And in this episode, we are going to be dealing with entity relationship models. Now, when we talk about entity relationship models, they are basically the graphical representations of entities and their relationship with one another. Now, entity relationship models, they are tools and features of database management systems, and they help us to standardize and make data and convert data into a form that we can easily refer to as a meaningful and useful form. Now, entity relationship is a graphical representation, as I mentioned earlier, of entities and their relationship to one another. Now, those relationships they are represented by different ways. They are representations for those relationships. Now, entity relationship diagrams illustrate the logical structure of database. And for example, the AR model would say that there are two entities, and those entities could be tables. So they could be tables, and then those tables will have records, which are each independent collection of fields. Then we also have the fields, which are the like let's call them columns of data. So when you organize this together, they form a table, and then in that table, collection of tables form a database, and so on and so forth. So entity relationship diagrams they are used to identify the data that must be captured. They are also used to store and retrieve data in order to support business activities. For example, when we talk about blue chip companies like Google, Tesla, and all the rest, they basically make use of something like this databases to um, to help them to manage their data. And in that case, they will need entity relationship models. So you can say that this most of the time we hear of the position of data analyst. Now, this data analyst, this is part of their works. They are related to this kind of duties. Then another function of entity relationship model is they help in the identification of the data. So they help to identify the data that is required to derive reports on the performance measures of a particular organization. So what this means is that they help us to pinpoint the exact data that we need in making some informed judgments on a business. Now there are different components of entity relationship models, and the three components we're dealing with today are the entity, the relationship, and the attributes. Now these three components they are very important components because they are kind of like the total things to talk about. Now, entities are objects or concepts within data models. Each entity is represented by a box within the ERD. Now, ERD is called Entity Relationship Diagram. Entities are abstract concepts. They are just random stuff. They are kind of, I like seeing them as representations rather. These representations, they have their own properties. They are kind of like a set in mathematics. So if you are talking about mathematical point of view, you call them sets. Or in data processing, we will just refer to them as entities. They are kind of packets of data, and their abstract concept that represents one or more instances of the concept in question. So an entity may be considered as a container that holds all of the instances of a particular thing in a system. So entities are equivalent to database tables in a relational database. Now, these entities they are represented by these two boxes on the screen. Right now, you can see there is a box representing for the student, and there's another box representing for the school. Now, these two boxes that are on the either side of the screen, you can refer to them as entities. These entities, they are on their own, as you can see. There's no relationship between them. Now, if we wanted to express a relationship between these entities, we would make use of a relationship um, representation. So it's a straight line that will be drawn from one of these boxes to the other. So it will be something like this. Run a straight line from one of these boxes to the other. If this was a straight line, so that would be the entity. Now, but since there's nothing like that, there's no such line. So that means you can say there's no relationship. Then let's talk about the attributes. The attributes, a key attribute is the unique distinguishing characteristics of the entity. Now, in the previous episode, when I talk about normal forms, I stress a little bit on the primary key and the foreign key. Now, basically, those are part of what we would call a attribute because those attributes they are the properties of data. Those attributes, they are kind of like the distinguishing properties of our data. Now, these um these entities, these attributes, example of those is primary key, as I mentioned earlier. Primary keys, they are the key attributes of entity relationship diagrams, and entities are further described by their attributes. Sometimes these attributes are known as data elements. So now in the case of attributes, you can see this is a column of data, and now these attributes, you can say let these attributes, they are different. Now any of these attributes that is unique will function as a primary key. For example, this one that is highlighted on the screen here, this is the employee ID. So I can decide to call it the primary key because it's it's is unique for each of the employee. Now basically this employee ID, which is unique for each of them, will function as a primary key, and it's also an attribute of the data. So the entities, they are further described by their attributes, as you can see, and these attributes, they are known as data elements. So for each of these entity, for example, the employee now is an instance of the entity. Then it has the attribute of employee ID, it has attribute of surname, it has an attribute of first name, it has an attribute of date of birth, it has an attribute of telephone, it has an attribute of address. So those are the different attributes. They are kind of like the information that we can get from data. Now we also have relationship. And relationship, there are different kind of relationship. They are simply those lines. They are represented by lines that are joining from one entity to another. They can be one-to-one relationship. So an example of one-to-one relationship is relationship between a patient and a doctor is a one-to-one relationship. Then we also have the one-to-many relationship. Example of that is a teacher to many students. Then finally we have the many-to-many. Example of that is and equipment allocated to many projects. So equipments to projects. So you have various equipment that are used for various projects. Now basically this is as far as you can go on this episode. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And on the screen you can see some questions displayed. So example of this question are define the following terms: entities. You have to define entities, attributes, and relationship. Then you have to mention and explain three types of relationship and what is cardinality. Now, I didn't talk about cardinality, but cardinality is basically the relationship between the entities in terms of the number of them. For example, it's kind of like there's a singular cardinality between the one-to-one relationship, and there's multiple cardinality between the many-to-many relationship. So it's kind of like the number of relationships that the number of entities at each end of the relationship. So you can comment in this video about your opinion of this topic. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next episode.